Welcome, everybody. Glad you're here. We're starting a little late. I'm sorry, technologically speaking. So, Jessica, if everyone's here, hold on.
Nancy, we're gonna get started.
We're getting started.
So, thank you guys for coming this morning. I'm really excited that we have Dr. Zahir Salou with us. Dr. Zahir, I'm just gonna try that.
Yeah, well, Mohammed is my first name.
Okay.
So
Okay.
whatever it's easy for you.
We were reconnected in this effort to have some perspective today because we actually were connected back in 2010. He was the president of the Council of Islamic Organizations of Greater Chicago at the time, and I was on staff at the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, and those two worked together, and our paths have crossed several times since then. But he is a physician, a board president of the Syrian American Association, a lot of civic and philanthropic work, obviously, and also the founder of Med Global, which is an agency that works with refugees all over the world with their medical needs. So we're really happy that you're here. Please tell us as much as you want about yourself. Don't take my introduction.
I am married. My wife Suzanne is running for state representative in District 82. She established an organization called the Syrian Community Network to help resettling refugees in Chicago area. I have 3 children and 1 grandchild, and my daughter-in-law is expecting a second one. So, my daughter is just started her medical school, second year of medical school in
Family of doctors.
and my older son works in USAID in DC, and my second son works in Accenture business consulting. I came to Chicago from Syria. And I'll put some maps on here to understand the geography and connection between Syria, Lebanon, and the Holy Land. In '89, I did my training at UIC in medicine and then in pulmonary and critical care. And since then, I've been practicing pulmonary medicine and critical care in the southwest area of Chicago. I work at Christ Advocate Medical Center. We have a group practice. And so if you have questions about lung issues and stuff like that, so this is my daytime job. And of course, like many of you, have been involved in the community, whether it's the Muslim community or the Arab community or the justice community or immigrant community and many other organizations. In 2011, at the peak of the Arab Spring, I was elected as the president of the Syrian American Medical Society, SAMS. And at that time, war started in Syria because people went to the street asking for political reforms, for democracy, and then the Assad regime responded with, I'm sure that you're familiar with what happened, sniper attacks, put the armies in the street to attack the demonstrators, and it was transformed from demonstrations to a civil war. And that led to the worst refugee crisis that the world has witnessed, I think, in the 21st century, where we had about 7 million Syrian refugees. Until now, 1 out of 4 refugees in the world is from Syria. This year, we have a record displaced people population in the world. 125 million people are displaced this year. Out of that, there's 25 million refugees. 1 out of 4 of them is from Syria. Half of the population in Syria are displaced inside Syria. 500,000 people were killed inside Syria. And we responded at that time by sending medical missions, building hospitals, mobile clinics, training doctors and nurses in Syria, providing healthcare to the refugees in Turkey, Lebanon, Iraq, and Greece at the peak of the refugee crisis to Europe, and many other things. And in 2017, a group of us met, quite diverse, group of humanitarians, physicians, and others, and we decided to establish Med Global to reduce health inequities, learning from what we've learned from the Syrian crisis. So Med Global is a Chicago-based charity that our mission is to build resiliency in communities that are going through disasters, whether it's natural disasters or man-made, by providing training, sending medical supplies, medical equipment, sending medical missions to disaster areas. Over the past 7 years, since 2017, we had programs in 26 countries. We impacted 30 million people. Now this year we have 10 teams on the ground in Ukraine, in Colombia, Mexico, Bangladesh, Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, Sudan, and Yemen. Sudan is the worst humanitarian crisis in terms of the impact on people. There are more than 11 million people who are displaced in Sudan. There's a civil war, there's a famine. So our team in Sudan is quite busy, but of course, what's happening in Gaza and Lebanon also is heartbreaking. What's happening in Ukraine is heartbreaking. Myself, I've been in more than 50 medical missions to disaster areas. Last one was in Colombia and Mexico, where we have clinics to provide healthcare to the migrants and also to the host communities. Before that, I was in Ukraine, and before that, I was in Gaza. I've been in Gaza 4 times, 3 times before this war and 1 time during this war. So I'm going to show some of the pictures and the videos that I took myself in previous missions and this mission. So that will give you an idea about the life in Gaza before the war and during the war. And please feel free to interject, to ask questions, to interrupt me for clarifications and things like that. Just have, the more engagement, I think, the better to clarify some of the issues. Yes.
How do you feel safe in all of these very difficult locations?
I have usually answer for this that sometimes these areas are safer than Chicago. Some parts.
That's why
Actually, I feel very safe. And my wife, and she last time she asked me whether we have life insurance. She encourages me to go, and I feel very safe, even in the midst of war. And Gaza wasn't particularly hard, especially that because the war was very close to the hospital where I was practicing. But I feel for some reason very safe. But we take precautions. We have teams on the ground. We take care of the security very seriously. So we have something called deconflictions, if you're familiar with medical missions. So we inform different parties that we are there, we are doctors, so don't bomb us. So that's called deconflictions. It doesn't give you protection. What's that?
Do they listen to that?
Not all the time. That's why, unfortunately, we have a trend in the last few years or so of attacking hospitals and doctors and humanitarians. I mean, in Israel, in Gaza, more than 600 medics were killed. And I think we're familiar with the World Central Kitchen, where 7 people were killed. And these are expats, but there are 500 plus Palestinian doctors and nurses and humanitarians who were killed also. So these things happen despite of the deconflictions, and it's one of the failures of the system, international system, because I was raised when I was in medical school with the notion that doctors and nurses, ambulances, and doctors should not be attacked, even in the war. And the Geneva Conventions for the past 150 or 60 years now guarantee the protection of doctors and nurses who are providing healthcare, even to the injured from the other side, from the enemy. But these norms are being eroded every day, and there's no accountability. So, I mean, I don't feel, in our conference last weekend, we had several panels about hospitals should not be a target and attacks on healthcare. And there's a huge now movement within the medical and humanitarian community to make people accountable when they kill a doctor or a nurse or bomb a hospital. But unfortunately, it's happening, and with impunity. There's no one talks about that. Maybe next one. And I just want to ask you, what do you see here? Hospital. Is it different than your hospital here, or what you expect?
Few beds. There are just a few beds.
Few beds. This is the ICU in Al Shifa Hospital in Gaza. They had, when I was there in 2019, 7 beds, active beds. But I'm sure that they had at one point much more. And it's similar to my hospital in Oakland in terms of the technology, the care. Physicians are up to date. They are actually more up to date on certain issues than myself and other doctors that we were in Gaza. They absorb knowledge quickly. We did training called portable ultrasound training. So this is a device that you connect to your iPhone or iPad. And then your iPhone or iPad becomes a Doppler screen, so you can put it on the chest to see if there's any fluid, on the heart to see the heart function, on the belly to see if there's any collection of blood. So this is a very nice technology that you can use it in areas with limited resources, so you can make a decision on your patients on the bedside. You don't have to send the patient for a CT scan or MRI if they are not available. And in many areas in wars, they're not available. We've done the same thing in Ukraine and other places. So, we trained physicians in Gaza and Al Shifa and Nasser on this, and they trained others. We donated also these technology. Each one set of portable ultrasound is about $3,000. And this time when I was in Gaza, every emergency room physician, every critical care physician in Gaza were using portable ultrasound. So this is a way to build resiliency within the local community, so you will have less death and complications related to trauma, related to disasters. Next. And this is a picture of one of our first mission. This is one our team, and this is a picture from the Mediterranean Sea port in Gaza City. Gaza City is a historic city. It has its port. Nowadays they have fishermen. They still use the old way in fishing, but they are restricted in how long they can go and fishing by the Israeli authorities because Gaza is still under occupation. Even though there's no military Israelis, IDF inside Gaza for this war, but the Gazans or the Palestinians do not control the air or the border or the sea. It's all controlled by the Israelis.
Next.
That one just usually works. And when I was in Gaza the first time, our guests made sure that we were fed very well. People in Gaza are very generous. My wife was with me, and we gained each one of us 5 pounds. The food is very good, and people were very generous despite of the shortages. They took us to one of the museums over there, which used to be the house that Napoleon resided in when he was in Gaza, which I did not know that history. And they told us that that's where he stayed, and this is a museum. And they had these artifacts from the pre-Christian era and pre-Muslim era. Like any other place in the Middle East, it's very old, and you have all kinds of civilizations that went through. And Gaza, for some reason, was known for its wine. And they had these different jars that they used to store wine. And this is one of the major mosques in Gaza. It's called Omar Mosque. Omar ibn Khattab is one of the disciples of Prophet Muhammad, which used to be church before that, which used to be a temple for the worship of some goddess, which is the case in many mosques in the Middle East, or many old churches that used to be temples and then churches, then mosques, as people changed or different religions went through the area. Thanks. After Gaza, we went to Jerusalem, me and my wife, and I took these pictures from, what's that?
The Golden Temple Mount.
Temple Mount, or the Dome of the Rock, as they say it, is a holy place for both Muslims and Christians and Jews. And this is from the inside of the mosque, Al-Aqsa Mosque, if you hear of that. And Al-Aqsa Mosque has a significance to Muslims because it is the place where the Prophet and the disciples used to pray towards in the beginning of the revelation. So the direction of prayer in the beginning of the revelation was towards Al-Aqsa Mosque. There was no, of course, mosque at that time, but that was a holy place from that time. And then, because there is a myth or a story that the Prophet Muhammad went in a night journey to Al-Aqsa Mosque from Mecca, and he prayed with other prophets, according to the Muslim tradition. So that's why this place is very holy in the mind of Muslims. This is Al-Aqsa Mosque, and this is Dome of the Rock, which is near the mosque. This is more holy than the Dome of the Rock. And what's this picture? famous church in Jerusalem.
The Stations of the Cross Church?
Yes. So, and this is one of the holiest place in the Christian tradition. And these are Christian pilgrims inside the church. Yeah.
Very Catholic.
So if you go to Jerusalem, it's very, actually, to me, it was very spiritual journey, which is not far from Gaza. It's about 2 hours from Gaza. The old city is very spiritual. You feel the history, and you see the diversity of people and faith that are practiced there. And history is present in every rock and in every street and in every person that you see. It's not, the United States is very young nation, but Palestine, the Holy Land, Syria is very old nation, and people still remember what happened 10,000 years ago, and it's present in their life. Next. And any person from Palestine, they will show you this picture. And can you tell me what's this picture represent?
What's Palestine and what's Israel since 1946?
Right. I mean, the green, of course, represent the historic Palestine before 1946. The state of Israel was established 1947. And then the land that is controlled by Palestinians.
After the
Shrank.
first war, right? The first war.
Yeah, this is 1947. This is the event plan of divisions. That was supposed to go to the Palestinians and the white area to the
It was
Israelis.
supposed to be the two-state solution.
Exactly. Palestinians and Arab rejected the plan. There was a war, and Israel controlled this area, which is much bigger than the UN mandate. And then with time, they controlled other areas, especially after 1967 war. And now these areas are controlled by different Palestinian
Be
countries.
interesting to see 2024 map.
It's worse.
It's even worse.
So
Yeah.
the last little section, what I learned when I was in Israel is that a lot of times sometimes settlers will go in the middle of the night into the legally Palestinian areas and put their, drive a camper in and then just sit on a farm. And Israel protects them, so Israel then surrounds them and makes a road to get there, and the road dissects a Palestinian farm, and Palestinians have to go around. They're not allowed to go through, and that's why you see all the little, am I right about that?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I went to the West Bank from Jerusalem. Jerusalem, of course, controlled by the Israelis. We took a trip to Ramallah, which is in the West Bank. The trip took about hour and a half for us as American citizens. If you're a Palestinian, it's gonna take you 3 hours if you're able to actually get to the West Bank or to get to Jerusalem. And everything is close over there. I mean, in an area in Ramallah, you can see actually the Mediterranean when the night is clear. So everything is close.
And there's been a mad rush of settlements since the war started, is what I heard, so there's even less.
More expansion.
Since like earlier this year.
So I have a question about the small green areas. It's my understanding they're surrounded by large tall fences. You
Yeah.
can't go from one to the other.
Yeah.
Is it around the whole area, or does it subdivide the area?
So you have a wall that goes all the way like that, and also walls in between.
So there are many other walls, aren't there, than the one around?
Yes, and checkpoints and military points that prevents you from going from place to place. And there are roads that are only for the Israeli settlers, and they're not, if you're Palestinian, you're not permitted to go through these roads. Thanks. Some of the landmarks of the history of the area, I'm sure that you went through this, but 1948 is a major year in the minds and the memory of not only the Palestinian people, but everyone who is Arab and Muslim, because this is the year of Nakba, they call it, catastrophe, where Palestinians lost basically what their historic lands. And then in 1967, it's called Naksa, which is another catastrophe where they lost everything else. Including Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Gaza was controlled by the Israelis. And at that time also Israel controlled the Golan Heights, which was part of Syria, and Sinai Desert, which was part of Egypt. If you grow, I mean, I grew up in Syria. These things are part of you. Every Syrian, every Egyptian, every Jordanian, every Lebanese kind of is connected by this history, and it's part of our lives. So when I came to the United States, I discovered that there's different version of history, and that I have to reset my history and speak differently. Because when you tell people, this is a major thing, then they tell you, but there's different version and stuff like that. And I have many Jewish friends. I spoke in synagogue, Beit Emet, not far from here, and other synagogues. Me and my wife were featured in Illinois Holocaust Museum as upstanders for our work in Syria. So I respect their understanding of the conflict, but there's always two versions for the story. And the version of the story that I grew up with is this story.
We've been hearing that same thing about narratives from
Yeah.
our rabbi study.
And so now when you hear other versions of it, do you have like your own truth, or do you still stick with what you grew up with, or how do you factor it all in? It's hard.
It's difficult. It's difficult. When you speak to Palestinians, to them, these are facts that will not change. To me, I understand that there is different version of stories, and some people feel strongly about them, and that I have to respect that. But I still cannot reconcile with what is historic facts. The fact that
Fact.
I'm a science. I'm a person of science. Yes.
I'm just curious as to where you get your sources of information. It was alarming to me that Sudan is in the situation it's in, and what news places do you recommend for good, solid, honest reporting?
The best way to get information is when you travel and meet people. Because my perception of Gaza was totally different before I went to Gaza. My perception of Jerusalem was totally different before I traveled to Jerusalem or to Ukraine. I had no idea that Ukraine is a powerful country, that people are really have a strong sense of identity, that they hate the Russians, they will fight to death, and they have a lot of power and energy. So when you go and talk to people who are from the local areas, I think that's when this is more important than reading books. I've read a lot of books, and I watch the news. I watch BBC, I watch CNN, I watch MSNBC. Each one of them have their own shortcomings. They're looking at the areas through the prism and the lens of the West, looking at the Middle East.
What about Al Jazeera?
I don't like Al Jazeera because it's very emotional. Al Jazeera English try to be a little bit more neutral, but at the same time, I feel that there is a lot of propaganda behind it. Yeah.
Well, what do you think of the idea that whatever happened in the past and whatever people are talking about now, that you must look to the future, to the modern thought, which is that we are on a brink, and that it's time for, our past speaker called the US the most powerful nation in the world. And I think that if we thought of the future, the modern look, as we see our problems today, that we need a large police force that are gathering of brains that will, with future of the world in mind, make a decision, which is for you. My heart is for you. And am I taking sides on your side, or am I trying to save the world? What do you think?
How much time do we have? Next meeting, we're going to the United Nations.
There's a concept.
Well, then I just made that statement.
Yeah, there's a concept in humanitarian work. It's called decolonization, and also there's a concept called localization. Localization, that means when you go into Colombia or Bangladesh or Ukraine, you don't tell them, I believe that we need to build a big MRI machine in this hospital because this is better for you. You ask them, what is your priorities as a local community? And they tell you, well, we want to have more vaccination for polio, or that cholera is killing our children. We need Gatorade, we need solutions, oral solutions, which is very cheap. And then you go with that. So localization, the same thing when you come to Winnetka and you tell them, the federal government should not come to Winnetka and tell them, okay, this is what you need to teach in your school, this is what you need to do in your churches. It should not be. What's the people of Winnetka wants? And when you go and speak with Palestinians, and there's 7 million of them, they tell you that we want this, this, and this. And I think it's important in this part of international human rights and stuff like that to respect the wishes and the aspiration of people. And that's where I come from. Yes, right now there's certain realities that we have to accept, and we have to be pragmatic, and we have to be, and when you speak with Palestinians inside Israel, because there are 20% of Israelis are Arab Palestinian, they tell you, well, it's good, it's not perfect. We are treated as a second-class citizen, but it's better than in the West Bank or in Gaza. Some of them tell you that one-state solution is the best, where you have all of this area under one state, but democratic, where everyone will have equal right. But the Israeli side, of course, will not accept that, because you have more Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza and inside Israel than Jews, or maybe equal numbers. So they will feel threatened, that their identity will be threatened. So we're at
The two states isn't
dilemma.
gonna work anymore because there's no second
At the
state.
two state, as you see, there's no two state anymore. So, I mean, that ship has sailed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, but Jared was talking about, our speaker last time was talking about having cooperating governments, maybe a Palestinian Authority and an Israeli authority like the EU that both own the land, both work in the land, but have separate laws that cooperate. Do you think that has any?
I'm not the expert on this.
Yeah.
I think if there is a will to treat people with dignity and give them rights, there's a way.
Then there's a way.
But if there's no will, there's no way. Right now, the Israeli government is controlled by extreme right, who believe the whole region should be Greater Israel, and that they do not regard Palestinians as equal. And that's the main issue. I mean, even when it comes here to the way that our media represent the conflict, what happened on October 7th is horrible. The loss of lives on the Israeli side is horrible. We should condemn it. That's a terrorist act. But at the same time, that does not justify what happened afterward. Killing 40,000 plus Palestinians, injuring 95,000 Palestinians. 5% of the people in Gaza have been killed or injured. That's the equivalent of 14 million Americans. 1 out of 100 children in Gaza have been killed. So this is not right. The terrorist act in October 7th does not justify what happened afterwards. And we have to say it. And what we have seen over the past year in our media, and also policymakers, that they dehumanize the Palestinian side. They don't treat them as equal as the Israeli side, and this is not right. By any faith measurement, whether you're Christian or Jew or Muslim or Buddhist, it's not right. Everyone should be equal in the eye of God. That's what I believe. So this is the map, of course. In our medical mission, we landed in Cairo and we drove what's supposed to be 6 hours to Gaza, to this area, Rafah border crossing. Took us about 16 hours because there were multiple checkpoints by the Egyptian army to make sure. So, and we were a group of physicians. We had medical supplies. Next. This is Damascus, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just a second.
That's the capital of Syria. This is Beirut, Lebanon. So Syria, Jordan, Egypt, and Gaza, Israel. Very close. Yeah. And this is why Gaza called a strip, because it's like a strip, very small area, 25 miles length and 6 miles width, 140 square mile. So it's a very small area, size of Detroit or Philadelphia. 2.3 million people live there. So it's one of the most crowded areas in the world. And it's actually quite diverse. So you have multiple cities in them. It's not only one city. So we were staying in Rafah at that time and working in Khan Yunis. These are 2 separate cities. Each one of them has different flavor, history, cuisine even. There's a lot of diversity within the small strip of Gaza. 80% of people in Gaza are descendants of refugees. These are Palestinians who left forced to flee from their historic lands, which is on nowadays Israel, and they are now descendants of refugees who are living in Gaza. And you have, of course, the local Gazans. Thanks. This is our mission. Dr. Chandra Hassan, who's a surgeon from UIC, Dr. Tahir Ahmed, Palestinian physician. I hope that he will speak here. We're talking with guys from emergency room physician from Christ Advocate. Dr. Nahreen Ahmed, she's a critical care specialist from Philadelphia. And Dr. John Kaler, who's the co-founder of Med Global, also is a pediatrician from Chicago.
It reminds me, how much, if at all, does Doctors Without Borders know about what you're doing? Maybe providing infrastructure and supplies for their doctors?
We are similar to Doctors Without Borders, but we believe more into localization.
It sounds like it's a different mission, of course.
It's
But
different.
maybe there's ways to
We
help
coordinate
each other.
We coordinate with them. We are part of what's called the health cluster in Gaza. Because we've been in Gaza for a long time, since, 2019. So we are registered as an NGO. We coordinate with other NGOs like Doctors Without Borders and with the UN in Gaza. So each NGO will tell the others, this is what I'm doing, distribute responsibility. So that way there's no duplication. So there's a level of coordination.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Could you explain the diversity and objectives between Doctors Without Borders and your organization? Because you said you had different objectives. I was curious what they were.
There are thousands of NGOs that do the same work that we are doing. I mean, there's Mercy Corps, there's Save the Children, there's International Medical Corps, there's IRC, and there's CARE, and there's Doctors Without Borders. Doctors Without Borders was established by a group of French physicians in 1970 in reaction to one of the civil wars in Nigeria, in Africa. And they started by sending medical missions to disaster areas to provide healthcare to the population. And with time, they grew and so forth. We started the same way. First of all, the world is full of disasters, right?
Yeah.
So there's a place for many of the NGOs. Our mandate is slightly different because we believe that local communities should be empowered to provide healthcare to their community. And we kind of complement what they do, providing training, medical technology, medical supplies, and advocacy on behalf of the population we serve. They do similar ways, but maybe differently. We are also more diverse. So in our volunteers, we have Christians, we have Jews, we have Muslims, we have Hindus, we have Buddhists. In our board of directors, we have the same. And also we try to represent in our board of directors the communities that we serve. So we have Palestinian Americans, we have Sudanese Americans, we have Ukrainian Americans in our board, we have Jews, we have Christians, we have Muslims, we have Mormons. So that way, it's more similar to the world that we serve. Doctors Without Borders is mostly French or European groups, yeah.
Interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks. They have, of course, US chapter that is mostly responsible for fundraising. This is a video.
Oh, all right. No,
Here.
let's see.
So this is in the way to
this is
Rafah
not
border
too
crossing. Rafah border crossing
Yeah.
separate Egypt from Gaza. And I took this video of these trucks that are full of stuff, food, medicine, and other supplies, and waiting to cross the border to Gaza. There's famine in Gaza, there's shortage of everything, and you have these thousands of trucks waiting to get into it, and sometimes for weeks.
You must forgive me. We didn't talk earlier this week. I didn't know that this needed this quick time program, which the computer doesn't have. It says it's not playing, the media isn't picking up.
So imagine that you have thousands.
Tell us what is happening here?
Yeah,
How many trucks?
I just mentioned, so, I mean, that's like, for 1 minute, I took this video of trucks, lines on both sides of the street, waiting to get into Gaza, and they're not allowed to, by the Egyptian side.
Why is it taking so long? Why?
Where, what would
They have to go through 7 inspections. Of course, although this is the Egyptian side, but the Israeli side decides when a truck is allowed into Gaza. Israel controls the border, even at the border with with Egypt. And if they think that there is something that could be used, they call it dual use. Let's say a needle or oxygen cylinder, and they think that could be used for weapons, they will say no more. No more. Even though they went and they cleared the initial vetting process. Next. And this is what you see inside Gaza when you enter. A lot of tents. So the population of Gaza is 2.3 million. 1.9 million of them have been displaced multiple times. So they are, told by the Israelis, they throw these leaflets and they announce and they send to your phone by text that you should leave. And if you don't leave, then you will endanger yourself. And now there is evacuation order in the northern of Gaza for 200,000 people. And these are people who were evacuated or displaced multiple times. So most of these people were displaced 4 or 5 or 6 times. And in every tent, you will have 10 to 15 people crowded, and you can imagine the situation. There's no access to hygiene kits. There's no soap. There's no facilities for everyone. Lateran, there's 200 people, and clean water is in shortage. So it's a mess.
And then your phone can blow up. Did you see any patients where those pagers were,
But that's in Lebanon.
sorry.
Tell me, how do they send a message to the phone? Is it like they can ping every number in a certain off a cell tower or something?
They have all phones of people in Gaza. And you see also the drones in front in the skies. So when I was there, I stayed there for 2 weeks with our mission. And you have always 3 or 4 drones in the skies 24/7. So they're watching everything, they're hearing everything. And all of the phone numbers in Gaza, they have access to. So they send you text that phone. And we had to inform because we are part of this deconfliction issue. So if we are moving from our house to the hospital, we have to inform the Israeli side that we're going this way, so that way they don't bomb the city. And sometimes they tell us, don't go through that route, go through a different route, or things like that.
Were UN troops ever protecting you?
There's no UN troops.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
So this is the fence that separates Gaza from the Egyptian side, and this is a fence, and then there's no man zone, then another fence. So it's impossible basically for you if you're a Palestinian to leave Gaza. Next. More tents, and this is a video, but that's okay.
Let's see, it's also quick time. Yeah, can I play? I'm sorry.
And this is a picture from my room at the Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, where the fighting and the bombing was in the neighborhoods 1 mile away from the hospital, but you can see and hear everything. Actually, the first night when we arrived in Rafah, we went to sleep. We were really tired after 16 hours of driving in the desert. And then like 30 minutes after I went to sleep, the whole house was shaken by a missile. And we went downstairs, said what happened. They said it's a missile that hit nearby place. What we did not know what to do, but then after the first night, it becomes normal. So every few minutes, few hours, especially at night, you will hear and feel the weapons. You can see them also. You can see the missiles nearby because Gaza is very small.
But
this is
what
you see.
area is being bombed there?
This is Khan Yunis. The hospital is Nasser Hospital. Khan Yunis is neighborhood east of Khan Yunis. So the Israeli army, IDF, was going block by block. So they initially bomb. They send the evacuation force, but some people stay. Elderly, disabled people stay. Some people don't want to leave. And they bomb place, clear it, then they move to the next block, they move to the 3rd block and so forth. Next.
So they're sort of, are they smart enough with their peeping eyes, the Israelis, to understand that you're sleeping in that hotel room and will stay away from there? I mean, that kind of thing?
It's all by GPS coordinates. So when you tell them that I'm going to go to this clinic, you provide them with the GPS coordinates of that clinic. And they're supposed to respect the fact that you have doctors there and patients and not the
You
bomb.
mean the person that's operating the drones and knows all of them? I see.
Yeah, but who knows, there's all kinds of things that happen, and one of the failures when we were meeting with our government after we came back with the State Department and members of the Congress, we told them that, this is not working. Otherwise, why would you have these large number of hospitals that are bombed and doctors who are killed, civilians? So this process of deconfliction was one of the things that were not working. And also the same thing with getting medical supplies and food into Gaza. I mean, the Israeli side claims that, they're allowing trucks, but we've seen thousands of trucks out, and we've seen definitely famine inside. I only ate canned food inside Gaza for 2 weeks. I had a sensitive stomach, so I really suffered. But I knew that after 2 weeks I'm gonna leave. But for people inside Gaza, they don't have access to meat. They don't have access to fruits and vegetables. And that's why you have malnutrition. That's why 500,000 people inside Gaza have the highest level of food insecurity. They call it catastrophic food insecurity, which is 1/4 of the population. Next. And these are people waiting for bread. There were a couple of bakeries and people were waiting for bread, 3 hours, 4 hours to get your bread.
You talked about how long it took you to get into Gaza. How about getting out of Gaza?
We stayed for 3 hours until we got the clearance, but we had our names cleared from before. And from Gaza, from Rafah to Cairo, it took us about 8 hours in the way back. It's easier to leave than to get in. And these are people and children mostly waiting for their clean water because there's no clean water. So, and the first thing that you do in the morning that you wait in line to get to the bathroom and also to get your water. Next.
Do you have enough antibiotics?
We took with us a lot of antibiotics ourselves, and the basic antibiotics are available, but the more expensive and sophisticated ones are not available. So from a medical perspective, this is a recipe for the resurgence of multi-drug resistant bacteria. Because you are using the same antibiotics for everything, that means you will have, I'm sure that we'll have right now, infections that has bacteria that is resistant to the antibiotics that are there. That means you will have more people dying because of infection and sepsis than people who are dying because of the bullets and the bombs. And this is a video actually of our clinic. We had a clinic that we established in Rafah area. First thing. Communications. So improving access to healthcare comes with different forms. This is one way. We establish clinic, provide free medications, and free consultation to the population. Primary healthcare itself. Primary healthcare, prenatal care for the pregnant, pediatric care, wound care, mental health support. This is what this. So anything you need, this is the first place you need. A lot of specialties nearby. We have some specialists, and the hospitals have surgeons and other subspecialties.
Yeah.
But in the clinic, it's mostly primary care clinic. Next.
When was this clinic built?
That was built 1 week before we arrived. We were there in January of 2024. But unfortunately, because after we left, there was an offensive on Rafah. So Rafah basically was emptied. And most of the people in Rafah, which was 1.2 million, went north to Deir al-Balah middle area. So this clinic is closed. So we had to move it to a different location. And this is me examining one of the young patients who's displaced. He has mental disability, but his mom told me that he was able to carry 2 big jars of water, and now he's not able to carry even one. And he lost about 10 kilograms. He had jaundice. So I diagnosed him with hepatitis A. I could not confirm the diagnosis because there's no test to confirm the diagnosis, but hepatitis A is one of those conditions that are transmitted because of the lack of clean water. So there was also an epidemic outbreak of hepatitis A. More than 8,000 people at that time were
Is there,
infected.
there's treatment, simple treatment?
The supportive care, hepatitis A, unless it's fulminant, I mean, you have liver failure, there's nothing else to do besides providing food and water and hydration. Next. This is Dr. John Kaler examining Alma. Alma is 5 years old, and she's also in a tent with her family, and she had bloody diarrhea. Every child who came to the clinic had diarrhea and had respiratory infection because of the crowding situation. It was winter, it was very cold. I had to cover myself with 3 blankets at night. So Gaza is, yes, it's not like Chicago, but because there's no insulation and there's no heating, then it's very cold at night. Yes.
I have 2 questions. One is, what's the general mood of the people there? Are they super angry? Are they buoyed up by their religion? Do they believe that Hamas is really working for them? That's one question. The other question is, do you guys ever worry about your own health over there?
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, we were told by the WHO in the orientation before we went into Gaza that if you are injured, it's difficult to get you out. But we'll make sure that you get into one of the field hospitals that has the best equipment in there. So even if you're a physician and you're injured and you're expat, I mean, you're not from Gaza, the things that are available are very limited. Luckily, none of us had, significant illness. I had respiratory infection, and I had like 3 weeks of recovery after I came back from Chicago to Chicago. In terms of the first question, that's very good question, and that was also something that I wanted to see. And people are quiet, and I saw the opposite of what you're saying. So I expected people to be very angry and edgy, and maybe insult us because we're coming from the United States. We have people who are not looking like me. I look like everyone in Gaza, but John doesn't look like in Gaza. But we felt very safe. People treat us with generosity. They were welcoming. Some of them were joking. They were upbeat. They are used to the war, unfortunately.
You're used to a hard life, right?
Not hard life. Many of them are quite educated. They lost businesses, they're physicians, they had, and now they are in tents. But in general, people are quite resilient. And I've seen the same thing in Ukraine, by the way. Despite the bombing and so forth, people are quite resilient and they're not angry. Yes.
And it's not just in this war, right? Like Gaza is every few years,
Yeah.
Israel.
This
has
is war number 5 since 2016. Yeah. But this is the worst, of course, and this is the worst. Yeah. Next. And this is a medical point that we established inside a tent. So we call it medical point. So these are local doctors and nurses who provide healthcare to the communities around them, which is displaced community, and we provide them with training, we provide them with free medications and salaries, so that way they can survive. Next. And you can stop me anytime, I know that.
Well, we're down to about 10 more minutes, and I know you've got about 20 more slides, so please.
Let's go down then.
Alright, this one,
Next,
this one,
next. Next. Sorry, I'm a physician. Well, this is, if you can put this video. Yeah, so this is one of the mass casualty event.
break time, sorry.
Okay, next.
There was a bombing.
There was a bombing, and then after the bombing, you basically, people who are injured, there were 35 people who were brought to the hospital. You treat them on the floor of the emergency room. There's not enough beds. And this is Dr. Ahmed treating this child who was injured in his brain. And they're using the portable ultrasound, which I told you, to see if this is Dr. Hassan and Dr. Ahmed, to see if there's any bleeding inside the chest. Thanks. Another child. They're putting a chest tube to drain the blood from his lung. Next. Another child. Thanks. This is one of the children that I took care of in the ICU. Unfortunately, He did not make it. We pronounced him dead, and I took a picture of his death certificate, and I shared it with President Biden when I met with him in April, because I wanted to tell him that there are children with names who are dying. One of the things that the media here always present, when they say 11,000 children were killed in Gaza, they say according to the Ministry of Health, which means that don't believe these numbers. And I believe it because I saw it myself. And many of my colleagues who've been in Gaza, and these are doctors from all over the world, have seen the impact of the war on children. Many children have been killed or mutilated or injured or lost limbs, and this is not right. Civilians have to be protected even inside the war.
11,000 of 40,000 are children.
11,300 out of 40,000, or 41,000 are children, and 6,300 were women also. Next. That's me doing a procedure. Next.
Could you see anything in Biden's eyes that said to you that he was listening to you?
I can tell you my perspective on that. Next. Okay, I think this is maybe
38 to
yeah,
50 or 38 to 45?
yeah, maybe this one.
41?
Yeah.
What's this?
Well, this is one of the people were displaced one more time, so the streets were clogged. This road take us about 30 minutes, took us 3 hours to get to home because everyone was leaving this area that was being bombed. Next. And they have what's left of their stuff. Yeah.
Mattresses.
Yeah. And if I showed this picture to any Palestinian, they will tell you this is 1948. Okay, so exactly what you see in the pictures from 1948. Go down. The same thing. They will tell you this is 1948 Nakba. Next. But actually, this is 2024. I took this picture myself. I removed the color because it's the same trauma that's happening over and over. So it's basically generational trauma that is affecting the same people. That's why when we have a very large Palestinian community here, to them, this is PTSD. These pictures and videos are bringing back the memories of 1948, 1967. Most of the people in Chicago, Palestinians, are descendants of refugees also.
Thank you, that's incredibly powerful, just the same photograph in black and white and in color.
Yeah.
What's changed in the last 7 years? How about nothing?
Nothing. I'll stop on this. I think there is all kinds of pictures, but I think you got the ideas. I mean, the idea is to show you the life in Gaza during this war and before the war. Yeah.
I know that sounds very naive, but if by some miracle these wars in that area would stop, would the people who've been displaced want to go back to where they were originally?
Really nice.
And could that area then support all these people coming back? I mean, I don't know, I mean, what the government in Gaza or Palestine, whatever, is like. Could they support all these people?
People are attached to their land, and if they have hope in the future, they will go back. Palestinians in general, like other people, are resourceful, they're successful. You know, we have an area here in Bridgeview, the economy and around it, it's called now Little Palestine because you have many businesses. In the last 2 years, 28 restaurants run by Palestinian Americans were opened in that area. And you can go and there's all kinds of food and you can see the vibrant economy. People are successful when they are given chance. Chance means education, future, protection. And I think this area will be a very thriving area if there is no war and if there's also responsible governments. One of the problems in the Middle East that you do not have responsible governments, you don't have democratic systems, so you have corrupt government that use the Palestinian cause to keep its brutality and prevent the development from the people. Otherwise,
Right.
yeah.
Well,
Well, that's one, that leads to my question. I mean, how much do you put on Hamas for the condition of the Gazan people?
I think they are responsible.
Yeah,
You know, when I spoke to Palestinians in Gaza, they were mad at Hamas.
yeah.
They said this is terrible. They opened the gate. They knew that this is coming and they did not plan for it. And why would you kill? I mean, people were against, I mean, people like us, you know, in Gaza.
Yeah.
They were against killing of civilians in Israel. And they're suffering because of Hamas. So
I
it's
know.
yeah,
So they're suffering because of the government that rules them.
because of the entity that ruled them. But also they're suffering more because of the Israelis. The bombs that are killing
Well, I
them are
understand
Israeli.
that, but I mean, you know, you think about how it was, I mean, it goes back 10,000 years, as
Yeah.
you say.
Well,
More, maybe,
it's
more.
not-
70 at
Yeah,
least.
yeah.
Please forgive us, folks at home, because of the slideshow, I couldn't see if anybody had their hand raised, or there's nothing in chat, but. Sorry, but if you have anything to say, please, we're here to listen. Andrew. Catherine?
Dr. Sahul, have you ever heard of,
Hey, Brian.
Andy, did you have a question? Sorry.
No, I don't. No, thank you.
Yeah. You were talking about the trauma, the generational trauma, and when I was doing some work on the cusp of the medical world with Advocate, we watched this film series called Unnatural Causes that was produced by the California Newsreel. And one of the episodes talked about the idea that the trauma can affect your physical health, your longevity, your going forward. And they said there's the incidence of diabetes is higher in I think it was 5 specific populations across the globe. And it's African Americans, Native Americans, maybe it's 4, Marshall Islanders 5, Aborigines in Australia, and I think Palestinians. And it was the only thing they have in common is that they have been forcibly displaced from their historical land. And, so science is this is interesting that, this is that manifested as an illness.
Higher diabetes rates.
That's
You heard of that?
that's reasonable, but also because they don't have access to nutritious food.
Because they're displaced from
Because
there.
there's, even before the war, there's shortage of certain things. It's Gaza is a big prison. I mean, there's only one entrance, one exit. And if you're Palestinians and you're born in Gaza, you're unlikely to leave it. So it's a terrible situation even before the war.
Is it just ridiculous to even think that this could come in your DNA, that you belong here, just like the salmon belong here?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're a prisoner. If you're a child born in Gaza, you're doomed forever to be in Gaza. Unless you
I sort of meant really seriously the DNA process, the biological fact.
When trauma, I mean, if we're talking about trauma it becomes part of your DNA. And manifested itself not only with physical ailment, but also with mental health issues, depression, anxiety, stunted growth, all kind of stuff that now is being discovered.
So you mean there's a child in Gaza, let's say, a family, something there, and they wanted to send that child as a teenager to come to school to stay with you here. They couldn't leave?
Some do. I mean, we have several families in Chicago that are from Gaza, and some of them left after the war, especially if they have dual citizenship. But this is a minority of people who can leave Gaza. One of my friends, Dr. Hassan, was
But who says that? The Israelis say they
Israeli. Israeli control. Even if you have cancer, there's no radiation therapy in Gaza. So, and there's limited chemotherapy. So Israel used to give permit to, I think 100 patients every day to leave Gaza to get treatment, especially for cancer and other illnesses in the West Bank or Jerusalem or other places. Now this is all stopped. I mean, if you have cancer in Gaza, you will die because you don't have treatment.
Wouldn't you think if the Israelis don't like the fellow people in Gaza, wouldn't you think they'd want them to leave then, and there'd be fewer of them?
Who will take them?
I don't know, why not, why wouldn't the surrounding?
First of all, people don't want to leave their land. And secondly, the whole region suffered from a refugee crisis from 1948 to 1967 to the Iraqi war, to the Lebanese war now, to the Syrian war. So there are not many countries that will accept people from Gaza, unfortunately.
And we have a
And
quota.
it's not right to tell people just leave your land because the other side doesn't like you. Yeah.
Well, this is probably something that nobody has time to think about, but I mean, does anybody think about birth control or not wanting to bring kids into this kind of world over there? I know that Muslims like to have big families sometimes, kind of like, you know, kind of stereotypically, but I mean, do they think about that? Is that something that?
I think both sides like a lot of children.
Yeah,
If you go
I mean-
to the Israeli side, you have
Yeah,
huge
but
families.
do they think about, they don't think about it the same way that maybe I do, but.
I think, first of all, birth control is allowed in Islam. It's actually very liberal, the Islamic tradition
Okay.
compared to the Catholic tradition and the Jewish tradition when it comes to birth control. So it's not prohibited or anything like that, but people have their own cultural thing. And I don't know, it's kind of compensation for their losses that they have more children. But I mean, I don't think that we can impose our values on people.
No, I know, but I just kind of wonder if it's their value to bring kids into such a bad situation.
In Syria, for example, and Lebanon, the average family have 3 or 4 children, similar to here, well, a little bit more. Yeah, but it depends, you know, I think it has to do with the level of education,
Right.
if you are from village or urban area, but mostly education.
Well, we're getting close to service, everybody. One more question, I guess, and then I'd love
I
to hear.
wanted to pin it on Netanyahu, so I'm saying, would it be possible in your mind to see that there would be a court that would look into the brain of, from a criminal point of view and try the man like we wanna try others? And so in the process, you might determine facts that are hidden, political facts that indicate manipulation and determination to wipe out everybody around Netanyahu so that he can have his land. And that would be obviously a criminal act,
You want another Nuremberg trial?
Yeah,
another Nuremberg.
How ironic, yes,
And-
work crimes are being discussed.
how likely that this will happen?
If
Zero.
people in every little block of the world starts waking up,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you know, I'm just wondering.
You know, I mean, I've been around for some time. I'm 59 years old. So I think we have a double standard. We means the West and the international community when it comes to crimes against humanity. If it's perpetrated by someone who is brown, than someone who is white. So yes, I mean, ICC and ICG persecuted some, you know, leaders of states in Africa for genocide, and even Bosnia. But I don't think, I don't see that happening to Netanyahu,
So
unfortunately.
I have a financial question. How much money do you need to raise every year to do this?
Well, we actually, because of the need, and because we try to do things right, so we focus on the programs, we focus what's good for the local community. We have grown from a small organization to, I would say, mid-sized organization. So right now our budget is $20 million. Still small, but compared to MSF, which has a budget of $4 billion, Doctors Without Borders. But so we depend on donations, we depend on individual donors, and also we get grants from faith communities. We have donors from the Jewish community, from the Mormon community, from Christian community, and from Muslim communities. And we try to be morally consistent. I mean, the victims of wars and disasters, regardless of who are they, are the same in the eye of God and in our eyes. So we are in Ukraine, we are in Colombia, we are in Bangladesh, we are in Syria, we are in Lebanon and Gaza.
So maybe just more people should know about MedGo.
Yeah.
As a charitable 501c3, you don't have to take political positions, but just by your very existence, you're making a political statement. Enough. And people who want to give can give.
Definitely. And, you know, I'm a physician, but, you know, also I was part of the Muslim community here. And I have an understanding of my faith that the essence of faith, any faith, is not only rituals. I mean, rituals are important, you know, going to church, going to the mosque, praying and so forth. But if you don't help the other, that you have no connection to, then I mean, there's a problem with your faith.
Very well.
Well, Doctor, thank you very much for coming.